Okay. We studied yesterday ensemble classifiers. So one of the important ensemble classifier is random forest algorithm. So it also works well. Many of the times people use random forest algorithm. There are packages to use that. I'll briefly introduce what is random forest algorithm before getting into the class imbalance problems. For random forest, what we do is construct an ensemble of decision trees by manipulating training set as well as features. So if we are given 100 features, we will not use 100 features all the time. If we are given some 10,000 instances, we'll also not use all 10,000 instances for all the decision trees. So we will sample instances, we'll also sample features. Whatever sample we'll get, for that we'll build one decision tree. Like that, it's so many decision trees we'll build. The class will be decided by some majority vote by all these decision trees what we are building. So the procedure is like this. Use bootstrap sample to train every decision tree. Bootstrap means you know that we'll select samples from the data set with replacement. Similar to bagging. Of course, you may not need exactly each time the sample size to the original size of the data set. You can also reduce the size of the sample than the original size of the data set. Use the following tree induction algorithm. At every internal node of decision tree, randomly sample P attributes for selecting split criterion. So we will use only P nodes to split at each internal node. What is P? We will discuss in the next slide. How do we select this P? Means very minimal, let's say. If you have 100 features, the first one will have 100 features, then second one will have again. If you want to use the same feature to be split furthermore, then again 100 features will be available. So at each node, you will have 100 features, or very high number of features are available. We will not use all features which are available at each node. We will limit, we'll randomly select only P features. We will see that which is the best split among all those P features. So at every internal node of decision tree, randomly sample P attributes for selecting split criterion. Repeat this procedure until all leaves are pure, unpruned tree. So we will repeat this procedure. Here we don't prune. We will repeat this procedure until we get all leaves are pure. Pure means only one class should exist at each leaf. Is it clear? Random forest procedure, how we are building random forest decision trees?
Yes, sir, clear.
So what are the characteristics of random forest? Base classifiers are unpruned trees and hence are unstable classifiers. So because we got each one to its purity, so they are not unstable because we have seen at least one or two instances which have that class with those attributes. Because we are not assuming anything at say, okay, majority class, there are still some are not going to the same class. Those things are not there. That's why these are unstable classifiers, at least on training data set. Base classifiers are decorrelated due to randomization in training set as well as features. So the first principle for ensemble is whatever classifier you build, base classifier, they should be independent. So now we are saying that why this random forest decision trees are independent, because we are randomly selecting the features, also randomly selecting the training set samples. So that's why they are decorrelated. We are sure this won't give you any guarantee that if there are features which are completely dependent on other, but it will give you more chance that they are decorrelated because we are selecting randomly. And if all features are dependent, then there is no meaning of building anything. It's only one feature we have. So this randomness brings decorrelation of the features, as well as we are also changing the instances also for each decision tree, training instances. So that helps us to assure ourselves more that The base classifiers are independent, they are decorrelated. Random forests reduce variance of unstable classifiers without negatively impacting the bias. Bias means underfitting. So at least if you cannot get good decision from one base classifier, or at least other classifiers. Yesterday we have seen, right? If you have a 25 base classifiers, even though they make individually 0.35 error, but when you take by voting, the error has come down to 0.06, means only 94% accuracy. Here also bias means underfitting. So these random forests reduce variance of unstable classifiers without negatively impacting the bias. What is variance? Variance is opposite to the bias. Variance is what? Overfitting. So random forest reduces the overfitting without impacting the bias, means it won't bring down overall performance on the data set. Selection of hyperparameter P, because we use it, I said it's at each node, we will randomly sample P attributes for selecting split criterion. How this P should be taken, some suggestion. Small value ensures lack of correlation. So if you take one or two values, then you may not get very good correlation between the dependent attribute and remaining attributes here, not among the independent attributes. Correlation is the class variable. So if you take only one or two, then they may not have, because some attributes together, they may be impacting the class variable. So small value ensures lack of correlation. High value promotes strong base classifiers. So if you take high value, then your base classifier itself will become a very strong one. So you should have some trade-off between these. So common default choices are root D. D is the number of instances. Number of features. If you have D features, you can take root to D features, means 100 features when you have, then you can take 10. If you have 4, then take 2, something like that. Then log of D plus 1 is another method. You can also, which one is more, root D is more or log D plus 1 is more? Base 2. How do you convert this root to D? Log of root D? Log of x square is how much? 2 log x, right? The power will come. So you can see that root D is bigger, then apply again log. Then log root D is nothing but 2 log D, that is 1 by 2 log D. So this D plus 1 you are taking. So most of the times logarithmic is reduces the value to the very small numbers. But base 2, initially it looks like they are bigger. Because 1024 itself will get something like, what is the log of 1024? 612 bits, something 8.
10, 2.10.
So that, but once after a threshold, log value will become smaller than the root D. Even you can think first in terms of the 10 squares. So 1000 log is the 3. So when 10 power 4 is 10,000, 10,000 log is 100 only. So if you take bigger number, this log value will come down. So if you have more and more number of features, you can use log instead of the root D. So this is random forest. So there are only 2 steps. At every internal node of decision tree, randomly sample P attributes for selecting split criterion. And first you need to do bagging also. Divide your or create new training instances from the training data set by repeating and selecting the small sample size or same sample size. That is, depends on how big data you have. Then second is at every internal you need to select randomly P attributes for selecting split criterion. This should be done until the tree is pure. Then selecting P is some suggestions. You can take root D, number of features if you have D, then take root D as P, or log of D plus 1 if you have more number of features in the data set. So one more method is there in ensembles that is called gradient boosting. Constructs a series of models here. Models can be any predictive model that has a differentiable loss function. What is loss function?
How far our prediction is from the actual.
We need to define for each algorithm, right? So that we are trying to reduce that loss. So it is not uniform. There are different types of loss functions. In fact, if we take logarithmic, what is the classification? Logistic regression, your loss function we defined there, right? Some we took it, see, negatives, positives, like that. So whatever loss function you define, that loss function should be differentiable. So differentiable is a mathematical phenomena that it see all the functions are not differentiable, only some functions are differentiable. Whatever loss function you define, those should be differentiable. In fact, loss function is differentiable for logistic regression or SVMs, neural networks. That's why we are able to use the gradient equations. Gradient involves this differentiation. So all those are valid here. So if you want to use decision trees, you should first define a loss function for that. So how do you define that loss function? Based on that, we can decide whether that is differentiable or not. If that is differentiable, you can use gradient boosting. But it is difficult for the decision trees to define a logarithmic loss function because you will get either 0 or 1 type there. So of course, we'll see that it's if you want to convert not 0 or 1, how do we convert those probabilities? Of course, you can take at the leaf. If you have 10 one class, 2 other class, then again you can say to be positive, if that 10 are positive, you say 10 out of 12 probability is there. Then it becomes 1. But is that uniformly can be defined for all the nodes? Then it becomes a differentiable or not. So most of the times, trees defining loss function is something different than the other methods, other methods what we use for classification. Commonly, trees are the chosen model here. So usually for this construction of gradient boosting, they're saying that trees are the chosen model. That is called XGBoost. Extreme gradient boosting is a popular package because of its impressive performance. So you have a package XGBoost. You can also apply this XGBoost. You need to see that how they are defining loss function there and how they are validating that is a differentiable function. So boosting can be viewed as optimizing the loss function by iterative functional gradient descent. So this is implementation of various boosted algorithms are available in Python or MATLAB and more. So anyway, you can see that what packages you have for random forest and this XG boosting. And earlier we have seen AdaBoost also, right? So this completes the discussion of the ensembles. So ensembles, you should remember, ensembles are multiple classifiers. First, we'll define or build base classifiers in multiple number. Based on those base classifiers, we will aggregate the class variable by using all those results, what we get for each instance. Then we studied AdaBoost, random forest, and gradient boosting. So coming to the class imbalance problem, this we have studied even in machine learning also, but it is key concept because remaining things are just packages you will use. But this you need to understand, there is nothing like package to decide this is good, this is bad. This will come only with experience. So some of the examples we will take and see that how do we get results, whether only accuracy is good result. If class imbalance problem is there, then accuracy will never give you any idea that how good the algorithm is. So those things we'll discuss in this. Lots of classification problems where the classes are skewed, more records from one class than another. In credit card fraud, frauds are very minimal. Similarly, intrusion detection, network intrusion or any other system intrusion. Intruders are very small number compared with the normal users. Defective products in manufacturing assembly line, same. Defect products are very minimal compared with the good products. COVID-19 test results on a random sample. So we have seen only 1 point or something 5%, even 6% the COVID positivity rate when people are testing in thousands. So that 5-6% is very small compared with the 94-95 to the opposite result. Then key challenges, evaluation measures such as accuracy are not well suited for imbalance classes. So here, if you take only accuracy, then accuracy you'll get it. See, even if you say nobody is having COVID, you'll get 94-95% accuracy. So it looks like your model is good, but it is not good because you predicted everything as negative for COVID. So here again, confusion matrix concept came. So we have true positives, false negatives, false positives, true negatives. So predicted class and actual class, this you know anyway. Then accuracy is nothing but the diagonal A plus D by the total number of instances predicted, A plus B plus C plus D. That is TP plus TN by TP plus TN plus FP plus FN. So if we take the accuracy, then some example is given here. If you predict everything is no, then what is the accuracy for this model? (990) by what is accuracy?
99%.
990 by 990 plus 0 plus 0 plus 10. So 990 by 1000. So 90% you are getting. So if a model predicts everything to be class no, accuracy is 99%. This is misleading because this trivial model does not detect any class yes example. Detecting the rare class is usually more interesting. So finding fraudsters, finding intruders, finding defects, that is important for them. So that's why, though it's a percentage, accuracy percentage 99%, that is not interesting for the people. So there's another example. This is 50%. Is it good if we go by accuracy? What is happening here? You are able to catch all yes correctly, but in catching 10, you also made 500 mistakes. Is it clear what I am talking?
Yes.
Class no, there were actually 500, but you also predicted them. 500 plus 490, 990 no's are there. But you predicted 510 as the yes. In that 10 are correct, the remaining 500 are wrong. Then accuracy is 50%, but what is the advantage when you compare with the previous one with this model? In the previous case, you haven't caught even one fraudster or intruder. Now you are able to class all of them, but you are also troubling 500 people, though they are not fraudsters, intruders, you are labeling them as fraudsters, intruders.
Right.
Now the cost will come. So how much you damage the reputation of the person or how much you save for the entire system, right? If one fraud happens, then that is the use. It may go sometimes life also. If somebody, some intruder enter into the bank and take all the money, then even they get a heart attack, whatever that it's here, they may not have enough means to survive. So life, here only how to handle, the bank should decide. These 500 people, they may not declare it. See, it's only internally they get a signal and they may contact the people, 500 people, whatever that it's. We got some signals that it's the transactions are fraud. Did you do this? All those things. So it depends on it. See the business where, then how do they use this information? But at least all 10 are caught here. But bank should decide it. See something like that. It's if they want to trouble all these 500, then they may lose their reputation. They may say that it's it is not useful for us. It's something. It's a famous example what they give in classification. most of the terrorists, they travel together, they stay together in hotels. So if they take all the data based on that, now whoever travel together most of the times stay in the same hotels. If they are branded like terrorists, then it's a that maybe only 1%, even not 1%, 0.001% of the teams like that. But most of the families also travel together. They stay in the same hotels. So you need to you need to make whatever test you want to do to find out terrorist all these families. So they say that it's not useful. This model will not be useful for us. Then find out some other model. Don't go by these hotels traveling together, all those things. So like that, it's saying if you may catch all the terrorists, fine, but you're also maybe 1 million people you are troubling for this suspecting them, checking them, making their delay travel, all those things, or keeping them in one place for questioning, interrogating. So this will not be useful for the defense agencies, whatever that it's. So then they won't take your money. Here also for a bank, if that feels that I cannot disturb to find out these 10 fraudsters, another 500 people, then I don't use this model. That is what they may say. Then you may need to think a different model. But comparing these two, first one is not at all useful for the bank. Second one, at least they can decide how can they use this information. This 500, they may do they want to put one more model above than this? All those things will come. But first one is not at all useful. Do you agree the first one is not at all useful?
Yes, sir. It is not catching
anything, right? It is not giving any information to the bank, first of all. So here, which model is better? Comparing with the 10, you got out of 10 fraudsters, 5 correctly, but you are not making any false positives. Who are not fraudsters, you are not labeling them. You are not means your algorithm is not labeling them. But 5 you are missing. Then this is one more situation to bank to decide whether use a previous algorithm, this algorithm. This algorithm, at least 5 people it is able to catch. This is better than the first one, right?
Right.
But better than the second one, again depends on how much of loss it will get if it doesn't catch these 5. Then another thing, this is same, the comparison between these two. So do you want to catch all and trouble many people, or do you want to catch even half? It's okay, but catch them, but don't trouble any not fraudster as a fraudster. So what are the alternative measures then? Accuracy is not a good measure for imbalance class problems. Then what is good measure? Precision is one, that is A by A plus C. A is predicted yes, and class is also yes. A plus C is a total predicted as yes. So if you predict 100, then how many are true positives? That is nothing but TP by predicted positive, TP and false positive. So that is A by A plus C. So if you say a person is fraudster, how accurate you are, that is called precision. How precise you are defining a person as a fraudster or intruder. Okay, so you are labeling A plus C people as fraudsters, but how many real fraudsters? Only A, means the percentage of real fraudsters in total predicted fraudsters. So that is nothing but how precise you are. If you say that is a fraudster or intruder, how precise you are in predicting that. That is called precision. Recall is true positives by true positives plus, what is this B? False negatives. That is actually yes, but you are predicting negatives, so false negative, that is. So false negatives means you should actually catch A plus B, that is coming down. But how many you are catching out of A plus B? Only A you are catching. Recall means you are able to catch, recollect, whatever that it's calling them as fraudsters. You are supposed to call A plus B, but your algorithm is calling only A. That is the recall, A by A plus B. I'm stressing because we will forget most of the times the terminology. To remember the terminology, I'm giving some meaning for that. Precision means how precise you are predicting a person is fraudsters. Recall means how much percentage you are able to identify correctly to be positive. That is the recall. That is A by A plus B. Then F measure is 2RP by R plus P. That is 2A by 2A plus P plus C. This is a combined something like harmonic type of measure, combining precision and recall. We want both. Here, what is a problem in the second table? Recall is what here? In second table, how many you should identify fraudsters?
10.
10. How many you got fraudsters from the algorithm? How many actual S is there? They are to be caught, right? How many S are there in actual C? That row?
10.
10. So how many you are able to identify by prediction?
All the 10, but we predicted 500 other as well.
That's okay. Recall, I'm talking about the recall. Recall is 10 by 10, right?
Yes.
So 100% recall you got.
Yes.
And precision is 10 by 510 is the precision. You said 510 people are fraud, but only 10 people are fraud. So 10 by 510 means precision is very, very small here, but recall is high. What about the above table? What is recall here? 5 by
10.
10 is the recall. So 1 by 2, only 50% recall you have. What is the precision here?
100%.
100%. 5 by total predicted. Yes, that is 5. So 5 by 5. So for one, recall is very small. For other one, recall is high. For one, precision is small. For other one, precision is very high. So this is actually combining both so that you should have one is very high, one is very small. So what happens, if one is very high, R is becoming denominator. If R is very high, P is very small, then P is small means denominator will become small because it is multiplication, remember. Adding will not reduce the R value, but P also reduce to R value here. Because even R equal to some 1, P equal to 0.2, R multiplied by P will become 0.2, 2 means 0.4 only you'll get. But here R equal to 0.8 plus, even if you add P, still it remains 0.8. Means denominator will not be reduced drastically if one value is small. But if one value is small, your numerator is drastically reducing. That's why even if one value is small, F measure will become small. Is it clear what I'm saying?
Yes, clear.
Okay. So even if one value out of precision recall is small, F measure will become small. Okay, some example is given here again. Accuracy is 10 plus 980 diagonal, right? Diagonal from left to right. That is 990 by total is 1000, 0.99 accuracy. Then what is precision here? 10 by 20. How many predicted yes? How many correctly predicted yes and total predicted yes? That is 10 by 20. That is 0.5 precision. What is recall?
10 by 10.
10 by 10. Recall is column total you need to see. For precision, column recall is row total. For precision, column total. So 10, 10, that is 20. For recall, 10 plus 0. 10 by 10 plus 0, 1. What is F measure? 2 RP by R plus P. So you are getting 0.62 here. F measure. Accuracy is 0.99. What about here? Precision is here very high, right?
Right.
And the recall is
1 by 10.
0.1. F measure is
0.1.
yeah, though your precision is 1, it has reduced to your F measure 0.18. Almost 5 times down, right?
Yes.
But in the above thing, it is though it is off, it is not reducing to off. It is increasing F measure more than the precision here. So So that is the advantage. Even if one is low, then your F measure will reduce further. And that is one measure to compare. To have moderate precision values and recall values, if you not get very high, good precision and good recall. And some more examples here. Again, precision 0.8, recall is 0.8, both are same. Then F measure is not reducing anything here, right?
Yes.
That is one, and accuracy is also same. So if F measure, precision, recall is same, then accuracy is also same. Then here precision is 0.04, very small. (40 by 1040), that is 0.04. Then recall is 0.8 out of 50, you are able to catch 40. F measure is 0.08. It has come down. Your recall is good, but even then when it comes to the F measure, it is negligible. Then accuracy is also very high, but F measure, if you go by F measure, then this is negligible. So we won't use this in some sense like that, it seems. But again, it depends on you are to catch the fraudsters, then it's okay. Out of 5,000, you are troubling only 1,000, right? Non-fraudsters are how many? 5,000. Means 20% you are. In some cases, it may be important for them, the 20%, but it's they may not feel to leave the bank if they ask few questions to find out whether they are fraudsters or not. But if they cannot stop the fraud, and whoever is cheated, they also lose money, and sometimes insurance companies will come, they need to pay, so they get huge losses. So all those things will happen. So it's for them, it may be important, even if you trouble 1,000 out of 5,000, catching these 40 people. The damage is very high. In fact, it's if you go by bad loans, if they give bad loans, how much they get? Only 5%, 6%, 10% profit or returns on a good loan. If they lose money from the bad loan, they lose 100%, right? One bad loan is equivalent to how much money 10 good loans bring. So for them, catching bad loan is very important. So measures of classification performance, there are different measures are also there, not just precision recalls. They are called accuracy. You know, error rate is nothing but 1 minus accuracy, how many mistakes you make. Precision is, you know this, that is positive predictive value. Recall is sensitivity, true positive rate, that is TP by TP plus FN. So some people may use this word sensitivity instead of the recall. Specificity is true negative rate. This is exactly reverse to the true positive rate. True positive rate will take TP, true negative rate will take in numerator TN. Then all negatives we should take. True negatives, false positives means they are negative, but they are predicted as positive. So that is FP. So TN by TN plus FP is the specificity. FP rate, false positive rate alpha equal to FP by TN plus FP. In other words, 1 minus specificity, FP rate. FN rate equal to 1 minus sensitivity. Sensitivity is recall, remember. It is easy to remember, but specificity you need to define similar to your recall. Recall is the true positive rate, or sensitivity is the true positive rate. Specificity is the true negative rate, parallel to the TP rate. Recall of the positives is sensitivity, recall of the negatives is specificity, in other words. So once you know sensitivity and specificity, then false positive rate is 1 minus specificity, false negative rate is 1 minus sensitivity. Then power equal to sensitivity, that is 1 minus beta. If you directly compute false negative rate, Fn by Fn plus Tp, then you can get sensitivity by 1 minus beta. So why alpha and beta are important? Alpha is false positive rate, beta is false negative rate. False positive rate means what? They are not positive, but they are identified as positive from the algorithm. That is false positive. False negative means they are not negative, but algorithm identified them as negative. Both are mistakes, right?
Yes.
So one type of mistake may cause more damage, one type of mistake may cause less damage. That depends on the business. So here, alpha is the probability that we reject the null hypothesis when it is true. That is a type 1 error or a false positive. This is a statistical word. It's okay if you don't understand. Null hypothesis means first we will assume something, then we will see the evidence. If evidence is not sufficient, then we will reject that hypothesis. So we said this whole prediction is that. So we are assuming everybody is good, not fraudsters, but we got evidence. But is that evidence sufficient or not? If that evidence is sufficient, we will say that is fraudsters. Then we'll accept the hypothesis. Null hypothesis means in the beginning, whatever hypothesis you make. If you don't have enough evidence, then you reject. Your evidence is not absolute. That's why sometimes you may make error. So that error is two types. If it is not positive, but you are predicting as positive, that is called type 1 error. So type 1 errors, sometimes people use type 1, type 2 errors. Type 1 error means it is not positive, but we are predicting that as a positive. So the not to be positive, if that predicted as positive, that is called type 1 error. Means false positives are type 1 errors. Beta is the probability that we accept the null hypothesis when it is false. This is type 2 error. That is positive, but it is predicted as negative. That is type 2 error. Most of the cases in imbalanced data sets, FN will cause huge loss to the businesses. If it is a fraud transaction, intrusion transaction, or terrorist activity, all those things, it's if you cannot catch, means if you make type 2 error, they are to be predicted positive. They are to be predicted intruders, fraudsters, terrorists, like that. If your algorithm doesn't catch them, then they damage more, right? So false negative should be small there. Eventually you are increasing what to reduce the false negativity is small. False positives will become more. Because even if small suspect is there, you will predict them positive, right? That may not be having enough evidence. You may need to further prove. So if you want to reduce type 2 errors, you will increase the type 1 errors. If you want to reduce type 1 errors, then sometimes we may increase the type 2 errors to reduce the type 1, type 2. So the balance should come between type 1 and type 2. There are some businesses, let's see, where type 1 error, type 2 error is tolerated, but not than the type 1 errors. If it is a stock market, let's say, if you predict 100 stocks, it's okay. It's even if you make false positives there. False negatives. See, false negatives means what will happen. It's that shouldn't be predicted for forming good task. You are predicting that is good stock. So what will happen there? You will lose money. That's all. Let's see, not much. For a small, let's see, what do we say? If they are not professionals, they want to put some money and just, let's say, play with the stock market for luck. For those people, it's if a person is putting all the money into the stock market, then again it is a different ballgame. But they are not habitual. They are just for let's say, checking whether they get money or not. For them, it's okay. They lose once and they may not put again money into that. So there are different cases. And it's even if 6 out of 10 times you predict good, it's fine. Even if it's a 10 you predicted, 2 you made false positives out of 10. Then if 8 are giving good returns, then 2, if they are not giving good returns, it's okay. if they can contribute this 8, whatever loss is incurred by the 2. So there, false positives are computed like that. Then again, we will see that what is the value it will bring if it is positive really, and what is the loss you incur if a positive thing, not positive thing, as predicted as false positive. I also got one example, one problem to work with a client. That problem was vacations offering. So they want to predict, they got huge data. From that data, they need to predict who are more probable candidates to be contacted and accepted our vacation tickets, means they are selling vacation tickets. So how do they contact? They contact by telephone. But the list is used 1 million people, and they don't have that many people to call. Then they need to find out first, who are with some data set they are provided, their characteristics, how much money they spent, when was their last vacation, all those things. So how many people, when you call, they accept your vacation tickets or they purchase your vacation tickets usually?
No.
Almost negligible, right? We get the daily calls, we'll give you this much of loan, it is already sanctioned, take. How many people will respond to them? Very few. So there, some 1 million, maybe they get 1,000 people. So these 1,000 people, they give huge profits if they purchase. But to catch this 1,000, you may say 10,000 people, means 10 times more than the original. Will it last for them? If you don't have this algorithm, they need to try all million people, right? And if this 1,000 are spread over million, so to catch one person, then they need to randomly call 10,000 by 1 million. Now to catch this 10,000, they are able to catch this 1,000, they can call only 10,000 people. So in that way, it is useful for their business. It is just, one telephone call. It may be one rupee, whatever that or still lesser if they can contact. So they will see that for 10,000 calls, it may be 10,000 rupees cost they are putting. And if 1,000 people really purchase their vacation tickets and each one will bring 1,000 rupees, then you get 1,000 is how much? Maybe 1 lakh or 10 lakhs. 10 lakhs. So 10 lakhs profit they'll get. So that is what they need to do computation. So their false positives are okay, but catch that guy who will purchase your vacation ticket. So type 1 errors, type 2 errors are important when you are dealing with the class imbalance problems. Then you need to see that, sit with the customer and understand which one is more important for you, not making type 1 errors or making type 2 errors. Or you want to catch all the things, then what is the cost for each of this false positive, what is cost of the false negative, then see that for which you are getting the less cost. So that model you need to choose, not just by accuracy or precision or recall. So all these things will give you only general thing, but customized to the business, this type 1, type 2 errors, that is nothing but FP rate and FN rate are important. In other words, specificity and sensitivity are important to choose the model. So alternate measures, there is true positive rate by false positive rate is one more thing. So true positive, when will you get high value for this? True positive rate by false positive rate?
False positive rate is low.
Small. So you want a true positive rate more and a false positive rate less, then you'll get high value. That is one more measure people will take. Okay, I may not reduce all false positives, but it's okay. As long as my true positive rate is very, very high compared with the false positive rate. So for these tables, what is true positive rate by false positive rate here? You know how to compute the true positive rate, right? That is 40 by 50. That is 0.8. Then what is false negative rate here or false positive rate? what are predicted false positive rate, right? What are predicted false here? False means no. What are predicted false here? Predicted class no is how much? 50, right? See the predicted class no, that column. How many instances are there in that? 50 instances are there, right?
Yes.
So how many are real negatives in this?
40.
Real negatives are 40. So what is false positive rate here? So you said false positive is 10 out of 50, you said positive. False positive. False positive. They are not positive, but you are predicting positive. Okay. That is, they are not positive, you are predicting positive. That is 40. 10 by 50 is false positivity rate, that is 0.2. True positive rate is 40 by 50, that is 0.8. Okay. So again, we'll compute. What is true positive rate?
40 by 50.
Yeah, predicted positive and actual class is also positive, that is 40 by total number of predicted positive, that is 40 by 40 plus 10, that is 40 by 50, that is 0.8. So false positive rate means they are not to be predicted positive, but you predicted positive. That is, let's see, 10. You predicted positive, but they are not predicted. They are not to be predicted positive. So 10 by, what is total number of predicted positive? 50. So 50 you predicted positive, 10 are going wrong, means they are 10 false positives. So in the total positives, how many false positives are there? 10 by 50. That is 0.2. How many true positives are there in total predicted positives? That is 40 by 50, that is 0.8. And accuracy is also 40 plus 40, 80 by 100 is the accuracy. And F measure is 2 RP, that is 2 multiplied by 2, 0.4 multiplied by 0.8, that is 0.64. 0.64 by 1. What is 2 PR? What is formula for this? F measure. F measure is 2 RP by R plus P. So R plus P is how much here? R plus P. P is not false positivity rate, right? Recall you got. Recall is 0.8. Yeah. And R plus P is 1.6. 1.6. P plus R. Then 2 RP is 2.64. How much? 1.28. So 1.28 by 1.6. So that is how much that is? 1.2 by 1.28 by 1.6. Maybe equal to 0.8. You can put calculator and see 1.28 by 1.6. That is your F measure. F measure is 0.8 and TPR is 0.8, FPR is 0.2. Then you are getting TPR by FPR equal to 4. Means 4 times more the true positive rate than the false positive rate. Okay. Means how many you will, for each 4 persons, you will trouble 1 person, though he is not positive, as labeling him as positive. Means out of 5, 1 will be troubled unnecessarily. So here you got the same thing, same table. This is 40, 10. Okay. Only numbers have been changed here. Here you got precision is very small. and the true positivity rate is 0.8. That is recall. So 40 plus 10 by 40 by 40 plus 10, that is recall 0.8. Then false positivity rate is 40. How many you are saying positive? This number should be very high. Or false positivity, out of 5,000, you are saying that 1,000 or out of 5,000 negatives, you are saying 1,000 are positives. So they are becoming false positives. So false positive is nothing but 1,000 by 1,000 plus 4,000. So you should remember these formulas for specificity, all these things. Where is that big table? So false positivity rate is false positives by Tn plus Fp. And false negative rate is Fn by Fn plus Tp. So positive, false positive Fp, only Tn will add true negatives. For Fn, Fn by Fn, in denominator you will add Tp, true positives. So if you use these formulas, you are getting for both TPR by FPR equal to 4 here. But what is difference here? F measure, right? F measure you got 0.8. In second case, you got 0.07 only. Why you got 0.07 F measure, very small value here?
Precision is low.
Precision is very low. So that has made this value, even recall is very high, that drag down F measure to very small value. So which of these classifiers better? There is no rule that this is better, that is better. Again, I told you, it depends on the business. You need to find out the cost of each error, whether you're getting more cost, incurring more cost if you predict positive as negative or negative as positive. So this F measure is 0.28 in this case, the first one. First one, if you want to understand, out of 50, you are able to catch only 10, right? Here.
Yes. Yes.
So is that good? Even to catch the 10, you are troubling another 10 people. Your F measure is 0.28. This is evenly, let's say you are getting 50%, your precision is also 50% here. Then F measure is also 0.5, accuracy is also 0.5. Then third case may be good. You are getting 40 out of 50 people caught, but to get 40, you are troubling another 40. Means for each person, one person you are troubling. So if you go by false positivity rate by true positive rate by false positive rate here, 40 by, this is 0.8, the first one, 40 by 40 plus 10. Second one is also 40 by 40 by
40 plus 10.
50, right? 0.8 false positivity rate also. So it is 1 you will get. TPR by FPR is 1, right?
Right.
So one more important thing for classification algorithms, they use ROC curves, receiver operating characteristic. This is a graphical approach for displaying trade-off between detection rate and false alarm rate. So how many you are detecting correctly, but how many false alarms also you are getting, that is called false alarm rate. Developed in 1950s for signal detection theory to analyze noise signals. This mostly has come from the electronics communication systems. For them, finding noise is important. So to find the signals, noise signals, they developed this ROC. ROC curve plots TPR against FPR. So for this curve plots what is true positive rate against false positivity rate. So you will have X and Y axis. On Y axis, you will represent true positive rate, and X axis false positive rate you will represent. Performance of a model represented as a point in ROC curve. So you want which one to be high, false positives or true positives? For a good algorithm, what should be high? True positives should be high, right? They should be positive and you should also be predicting them as positive. If you make many mistakes, then your algorithm is making many mistakes. The false positives should be less. So ideal value for true positives and false positives, true positive rate should be 1 and false positive rate should be 0. Means you are able to catch all the positives without making any mistake. That is the ideal case. What is the ideal case in this graph? Which point will show us ideal case? False positives should be 0. True positives should be 1. Means this corner, right? Left upper corner is the is the value we want. If an algorithm gives false positives 0 and true positives 100%, that is this left corner. Then declare everything to be positive class. Declare everything to be positive class, that is 1, 1. Means you are getting all catch and you are also making all negatives also positives. So then you are getting how many false positives you are making? 100%, because everything you are calling as positive. Then I'd say all negatives are also called positives. So total number of positives which are actually true negative, and total number of predicted positives which are true negatives by true negatives, that will become 1. And you are able to catch recall also 1 there. So this right upper corner, left upper corner is 0, 1. That is the ideal case. Right upper corner is the, without doing any algorithm, we are predicting everything is same class. Then you get the right upper corner case. Then 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, that is nothing but declare everything to be negative class. Then you don't get any positives. So true positive rates will become 0. So 0, 0 is the declare everything to be negative class. Then because you predicted every positive, every negative as negative, so there is no false positivity rate. Because you haven't classified any negative as positive, right? There are no false positives, so that is 0. You are also unable to recollect or recall even one of the positives. So true positive rate is also 0. So there are 3 corners here. This is the ideal case left upper corner. Right upper corner is the random or nothing, doing nothing, just if you use all of the same class, then you are getting the right upper corner. Then the starting point, origin, that 0, 0 is the predicting everything as negative class. Diagonal line, random guessing. So even if you guess randomly, your false positive rate and true positive rate is almost same. What is this line equation? X equal to Y, right? This line, whenever you find a point on this line, for that point, false positivity and true positivity are same. This line itself, this diagonal line is called X equal to Y. Below diagonal line, prediction is opposite of the true class. So when you draw this ROC curve, we'll show that how to draw the ROC curve. But once you draw the ROC curve, under the curve, if you have maximum area, that curve is good. Above the curve should be minimal area above the curve within the rectangle. So ROC curve, if you want to use, so ROC curve, whatever curve you are getting for that curve, under the curve area should be more, which is covering this rectangle, than the area above the curve. So in the ideal case, 1, 0, So your curve goes to 0, 1 and 1 to this 1. So this directly goes like this. Then your curve area, then ideal curve will be like this. Ideal curve is like this. You are getting the entire thing. Something it should go along this, then turn like this. So then you will cover all this area. That is the good thing. That is the ideal case. If you don't have ideal case, then your curve will come like this. But any curve above the diagonal is somewhat is good than the below diagonal. Below diagonal is performing than the random, performing badly than the random guessing. So how to now draw these curves, that we'll see. So before that, we may see some more examples of this. To draw ROC curve, classifier must produce continuous valued outputs. So what is continuous valued outputs? The logistic regression output is what? Their probability values to be positive, to be negative, right? Then we put a threshold. According to the threshold, if that is less than, we will predict something. Greater than, we predict something, right? So they are continuous values. The logistic regression always predict value between 0 to 1. Similarly, your SVMs, your neural networks also, you can see that you can make, because your function, what functions you take there, sigmoid function you will take, right? Sigmoid value is always between 0 to 1. But that is continuous values you are giving. So whenever you are getting continuous values, you can draw the ROC curves. Outputs are used to rank test records from the most likely positive class record to the least likely positive class record. It means if you get it, say values, though it's a, by default, you may say that it's if you predict value greater than 0.5, you may say 1. But there are instances which will have 0.8, 0.9, 0.1, 1.0. So they're all highly probable positive classes, which are coming with 0.5. They are marginally coming as positive classes. So we need to rank the records not based on the class. We will rank the records based on what is probability you are getting to be say that is positive. So outputs are used to rank test records from the most likely positive class record to the least likely positive class record. By using different threshold on this value, we can create different variations of the classifier with the TPR by FPR trade-offs. So now what we do is we will put all them into sorted order, which are predicted with 1, then 0.9, 0.8 like that. Then we'll draw a line that is nothing but threshold. So if we say more than 0.4, then we'll say it is positive. Anything less than 0.4, it is negative. Because imbalance classes is important. Imbalance classes, it's you won't get high probabilities for most of the things because they are very. So sometimes to catch them, even smallest possibility is there to be positive, you need to catch them. So even if 0.2 probability is there to be positive, then you may catch them because they're in imbalance classes, they are very minimal and you are not getting correct signal to be predicted with high. And you want to catch all positives. They are very in small number. So you may make type 2 errors more, but it's okay. But you are catching, your recall should be high. So this threshold is adjusted according to the whether you want a true positive rate more or false positivity rate should be very small. So based on this, we will adjust the threshold. So that threshold by default, we took 0.5 many times, but if you understand the package, what you use, there will be one parameter threshold. That threshold you can give value. So when you want to catch all the positives, you may reduce the threshold. Okay, I don't need it. Say it should be more than 0.5 to be predicted positive because I know that half of them will go wrong. So I want to catch all of them. That's why I'll put 0.3, 0.2 also. Okay. So first of all, to draw the ROC curves, we need to get the continuous values outputs for prediction, and all the instances which you are testing or testing how this algorithm is working, order them in a sorted manner. Then you select a threshold so that it's for that threshold, how much you are getting true positive rate and what is the false positivity rate. That will become a point for you in ROC curves. So many classified produce only discrete outputs, that is predicted class. In decision trees, you won't get any prediction, but we'll convert them into prediction. How to get continuous valued outputs? Decision trees, rule-based classifiers, neural networks, Bayesian classifiers, k-nearest neighbors, SVMs, all these things. Then if you see this decision tree, we are saying that it's a leaf. When it comes to the leaves, you are writing either positive or negative here. 0 means negative, plus means positive. How we are changing that to continuous valued outputs? What are the values it leaves for this right side decision tree? What are the values it leaves? Nodes are attribute values. You are comparing that attribute value less than, greater than. So leaves, they are not comparison, right? Earlier you are having plus or zeros, but now you have what values here, right side tree?
Real number continuation.
Some numbers, 0.107, 0.143. How you got these numbers? Means total positives. Positive percentage at this leaf is 0.107. Means if you have 11, then you have only one positive here. And at this leaf, you have 0.143 positives, and right leaf, you have 0.669 positives. So instead of going by majority, you will give what is the percentage of positives at that leaf. So here example is given. Alpha equal to 0.3, then predicted class O, class plus then actual class. So usually what happens, let's say, though you have 645 plus 298 at one leaf, by majority you will declare everything is positive. Then you don't get any continuous value. But if you take 645 by 645 by 298, that will give you continuous value. Similarly, 209 by 209 by 209 by 209 plus 948. So we will represent only the probability to be predicted as positive. So we are not worried about it. See what is the percentage of negatives at each. Automatically you will get negatives if it is a binary classification. 0.143 means that there are 0.857 are negatives. So 0.669 positives means you get 0.34 something 331 is the negative there. So instead of representing the majority class, you need to write those percentages at each leaf. One-dimensional data set containing two classes, positive and negative here. Any points located at x greater than t is classified as positive. So your t. So any point located at x greater than t is classified as positive because they're more than, your percentage is more than that threshold. So you have a negative class and you also have positive class here, but there is some intersection. Some of the instances they're falling into both the negative and positive, means you are able to see such instances, means you are not getting clear signal for them. So there you get problem of getting false positives. So to reduce the false positives, then either you should say anything greater than 15, because still 15 you are getting some positives below the left side of the blue line. So you will get only this part as the true positive. So your true positive rate will go down if you say that only blue line as the border. So you are taking something below the blue line, though you have seen some examples after the blue line, only let's see, only elements below the, after the blue line, if you predict, then you may be good with the precision, not with the recall. So here at the threshold T, TPR equal to 0.5, true positivity rate means only half of them you are able to catch. Then false negative rate is 0.5. Again, half which are not positive, but you said they are not negative, but you said negatives. Then FPR is 0.12. So only 12 out of 100 you made non-positives as positive predicted. Then TNR equal to 0.88. So at this threshold. So this converts into ROC curve like this. So it is covering more area than the lower half of the rectangle. That's why it may be somewhat good algorithm compared with random guess. So when a classifier is given, how do we construct a ROC curve? So use a classifier that produces a continuous valued score for each instance. So you got 10 instances. For each instance, you need to get these values. So for logarithmic logistic regression, all those things will get these values. I have explained for decision trees, you take the percentage of the positives at that leaf. Then you'll get these values. 0. Whatever that it's a 669 we have seen there. Once you get this, arrange them in a sorted descending order, 0.9593 like that. So continuous valued score for each instance, the more likely it is for the instance to be the positive class, the higher the score. So this is 95% probability is there, this to be labeled as positive class. For this labeled as positive class. But this is true class. So you got 87% from your algorithm to be labeled as positive class, but in originally it is a true class, means that 13% chance is there. It is taking that 13% chance. So similarly, you go all these things. Now, if you draw a line like 0.93 as threshold, what will happen? You will make no mistakes in predicting positive class. So you predict only 2 as positive, remaining things are negative, right? If you draw a threshold, the value should be 0.93 to be predicted as positive. Then what problem we are creating here? If you take threshold as 0.93, you're getting all whatever you are predicting positive as positive. But what mistakes you are doing?
We're missing out 3 positives.
Yeah,
to
get all those 3 positives, then what should be your threshold? 0.25. Then you are making false positives more, right?
Right.
So even to get third positive, you need to make 3 false positives.
Right.
Because if you take the threshold 0.85, then again 0.53 if you take, then you get 4 positives and negatives. So like that, it's here, where do you draw the line? That is this ROC curve actually. So the more likely it is for the instance to be the positive class, the higher the score. Sort the instances in decreasing order according to the score. Apply a threshold at each unique value of the score. At each unique value, you see what is rate, false positivity rate and false negativity rate. TPR, FPR. Count the number of TP, FP, TN, FN at each threshold. Get TPR and FPR. Get these values. So here an example is given. If you compute for the same 0.25, all those things, TP, FP, TN, FN, you are getting TPR 1, 0.8, 0.8, 0.6 like that. FPR, you are getting these values. Then ROC curve, first you need to identify the points. Okay, so we will start with back to front. So TPR and FPR, 1 point is 0, 0. Where is that first point? Let me get this. So this 0, 0 point we should identify. This is 0, 0 point, right? I'm coming from back to front.
Yes.
Because I need descending order, right? Then 0.95. So if I put threshold 0.95, what point I'm getting TPR and FPR? This x-axis is the FPR. Y-axis is the TPR. In x-axis, you have still 0. What is your Y value?
0.2.
0.2. So what is that point? This point is that 0, 0.2, because FPR is X value. You need to see down to up. Then what is the next point? If you take threshold 0.93,
0 and 0.4.
0 and 0.4. That is this, right?
Yes.
Then what is next point?
0.2 and 0.4.
That is this point. What is next point?
0.2 and 0.6.
This point. Then you are getting
0.4, 0.6.
0.6, then 0.6, 0.6, then 0.6, this. All these points you identify like this. So you won't get a curve initially, you'll get a curve like this. It's okay. It's if you use many points, not just 0.25, 0.43 here, only 10 instances we have. That's why it's we are not getting a curve. But if you have so many instances, they take values very close. If 0.26 is also there, then you'll get very close value. Then it looks like your earlier what that curve is shown, right? So usually with 10 instances, we won't build the ROC curve. We will take it, see, some 1,000, 2,000 instances. Then you'll get a curve type of thing. Here it is step function type you are getting, but still you can see that under this curve, are you getting more area than the random diagonal? See, so are you getting more than half area under this red curve in this rectangle?
Yes.
Yes. So somewhat better this ROC curve shows like this, it's whether we are getting signal or not. And usually people will take it, say wherever you get high values. Say one way is stop at 0.4, means stop at 0.93 threshold, then you won't get any false positives. Then again you move here, then wherever you feel that's okay, then you'll take that as a threshold. So first you need to compute TPR and FPR, then get this. But of course, it's there is just, I think, some. What is that package? Anybody used this ROC curve? Confusion matrix, which package will give you some measures, right? They called classification measures or something. So if you import that, then you'll get confusion matrix. Similarly, there is something you need to import. From that import, if you give just values, prediction values, it may not give you directly, because if you predict classes, you won't get the ROC curves. First, you need to predict the probabilities. Give those values, automatically it will, if you call this function ROC function, I don't remember what you need to find out, then it will give you ROC curve. So whenever you build a classifier, you should also show that it's your ROC curves, so that people will understand how much you are getting, how much area is covered by using that algorithm, and how much for how many positives you are making, how many mistakes to catch how many positives. So using ROC for model comparison. So how do we use this ROC model comparison? ROC full form, do you remember? Receiving operator characteristics, right? AUC means area under curve. So some people also call AUC curves also. So how much of area is covered? So ideally you should cover entire rectangle, but how much area you are covering? So people also called AUC this. So no model consistently outperforms the other. M1 is better for small FPR. So which classification model is good? You might have used two classifiers. For one classifier, you got red curve, ROC curve. For other classifier, you got blue curve. So which one is good in both of these? We cannot say which one is good, but we can say that in which situation red is good, which situation blue is good. M1 is better for small FPR. What is M1 red one? Means you want to limit false positives. So when you limit false positives, then M1 is better, so that it is making a higher true positive rate also for that small false positives. But M2 is better for large FPR. If you allow as many as false positives, then it is able to catch more positives. So there is no rule that the M1 is better, M2 is better. Again, you need to see that again, how much it makes sense to the business if they want to use the algorithm into business. Dealing with imbalanced classes, summary, many measures exist, but none of them may be ideal in all situations. Random classifiers can have high value for many of these measures. TPR by FPR provides important information, but may not be sufficient by itself in many practical scenarios. Given two classifiers, sometimes you can tell that one of them is strictly better than the other. C1 is strictly better than C2 if C1 is strictly better TPR and FPR relative to C2, or same TPR and better FPR and vice versa. So if parameters are same, then whichever is having more remaining same one value is high. Of course, FPR should be less, let's say. Based on that, you can say which one is better, comparing only those two. Even if C1 is strictly better than C2, C1's F value can be worse than C2's if they are evaluated on data sets with different imbalances. So classifier C1 can be better or worse than C2 depending on the scenario at hand. Class imbalance, importance of TP versus FP, cost, time, trade-offs. So again, some examples are given. Which one is better? Again, we need to get that cost trade-off, time trade-off, how much time it will take, how much of cost it will take, all those things. So some examples are given here for these things, how to compute these measures. You can say that for some F measure is good, but your TPR by FPR is not good. For first one, F measure is 0.66. Second one is 0.94. But TPR by FPR is small when compared with the first one to the second. Then for third one, F measure is very, very high value and TPR by FPR is also high value. Precision is high, recall is also high. False positive rate is also very small. So this is always better algorithm, this third one. If you have clear-cutly like this, all parameters are good, then you can say that model is good irrespective of cost, all other things. So some more examples here. The first one, F measure is 0.62. FPR, this is the same thing. This is also same, right? Modify the building classifiers with imbalanced training set. Modify the distribution of training data so that rare class is well represented in training set. Undersample the majority class, oversample the rare class. What does it mean? So when you are building classifiers with imbalanced training set, these are the suggestions. So you need to modify the distribution of training data so that rare class is well represented in the training set. For that, you need to undersample the majority class, oversample the rare class. What does it mean?
Take less number of samples from the majority class and stratified sampling.
If you have 90 versus 10 composition is there, when you are selecting training, don't take only 10% of the, that is exactly sampling, right? 10% of the negatives, 90% of the positives. If you want to stratify it, make two parts, positives and negatives, then select 90%. That is the same. Oversampling means what? You reduce the positivity class. Instead of 90, though they are 90% positives, you select only 75% positives and 25% negatives. you know that there are no 25% negatives in the entire population, but you want to oversample them so that you want to get more signal from the negative class than the positive class. Or in this case, if rare class is positive, then though positive class is 10% present, you make 25% samples from the positive class, rare classes. So oversample the rare class, undersample the majority class. So don't fix, it's in your toolbox, you should also include this. You should be able to tell them that your class, if it is a classification problem, your class is imbalanced data, your data set is, and do you want to take random sample or do you want to take something like customized, but still randomized, but randomized, you will put two parts. One is positive class instances, negative class instances. Then you will ask it, how much percentage to be given for which class. So that also to be included now in your ML toolbox when you use these classification problems. So with this, we complete classification in data mining and put together machine learning. Now we get into the clustering algorithms from tomorrow onwards. So one announcement.